debt was at 50% of GDP. So we need orderly and early restructuring that are market-oriented of the public debt in the countries that are near insolvent. The Europeans are saying we're going to do it after 2013. That's a mistake. 3, we decide to socialize the private losses and put losses, for example, of the financial system. Look at Ireland, the balance sheets of the government, and now it's breaking the back of those governments, like in Ireland. You need an orderly restructuring of even senior unsecured bank debt. Again, that problem has been pushed to the future. And finally, there is no growth, and actually there is still outright contraction in most of the periphery. And if you're not going to have economic growth, you'll have 2 problems. One is the social and political backlash against austerity and reform is going to become worse because people don't see light at the end of the tunnel. 2, you have to stabilize debt and deficits in the private and public sector as a share of GDP. If GDP keeps on falling, stabilizing this thing, even with austerity, is not going to happen. And I don't think there is a strategy for resuming economic growth in the periphery of the Eurozone. The policy of the ECB is too tight. The euro is too strong. There is fiscal austerity. There is a negative effect, however necessary, on economic growth. And there is no economic growth. There is continued contraction. So the mood in the market is slightly better, but I think that the fundamental problems of the Eurozone remain unsolved.
Just coming off that to Xiumin and Azim, Premji, very provocative article in the Financial Times this morning by Kishore Mahbubani, great friend of many of ours, saying that people in Asia are now fed up with the West because they can't get their economic house in order. The Europeans can't sort out their sovereign debt crisis. The Americans can't sort out long-term budget deficits, and that Asians are getting fed up with being lectured to by Westerners. Do you think that's right, Azim? Do you think that's right, Xiumin?
Lectured? Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, of course.
Please go ahead.
This is a tough question. It's much easier for you to go ahead.
Quite sensible. I didn't quite understand your question.
Do you think those in Asia are getting fed up with being lectured by Westerners on how to run their economy?
Frankly, speaking for India, I don't know too much about the rest of Asia. I don't think so. I think they're being fed up or being constantly needled to keep on opening the economies all the time. And there doesn't seem to be a two-way traffic on that. And people don't seem to equate in terms of liberalization, same principles applicable to products and services. And that's fundamental. I mean, if you're talking about global trade is products, global trade is services. And you cannot have one standards of opening up economies of emerging countries to products. And contra to that, you have policies, particularly in the United States, which put all kind of restrictions on imports of services. It just cannot be a one-way traffic.
So slightly fed up. Slightly fed up.
More than slightly fed up.
You come in.
I don't know how to define your concept, say, the fed up. I think the crisis obviously makes it very clear. We need to think deeply, as Jem pointed out, to further to think about what will be the economic model for this world. If you're looking for the advanced economy, once they reach, say, $30,000 per capita, and so it become norm, low growth rates, right, low inflation rates, very high social welfare package. Everybody was born with entitlement and with a big physical deficit. This is very much become the things, and why bother? Life is so good, right? And but then you will see three things. I think Jim had a point. Demographic changes, number one, and number two is the globalization. So also, it's a very number three, obviously, global resource restrictions, and the crisis made this very clear. This model not necessarily work.
Right.
I think it's for the whole emerging market in Asia, they are learning from this crisis, try to figure out what will be the good model for the Asian and for the world in the tomorrow. I think this is really the fundamental issues. I mean, Nouriel pointed out this correctly, because if you're looking for the physical problem, it's not for the today. It's in the future. If you factor into the non-funded liability on the welfare, on the pensions, and on the Medicares in the current today's budget deficits, you will see the numbers are huge. much bigger.
So Asians look at what the French would call the 30 glorious years after 1945, in which significant pensions and other welfare benefits were established, and are saying to themselves, we can't go down. That road won't work for us. We can't do that model.
I think this has become a clear message for the whole world. But Asia, emerging market in Asia also got to be very careful, because there's 1 billion people living in the advanced economy, 3 billion people living in the emerging market. If you ask everyone in the emerging market, what is your life model in tomorrow? They will say American life, a big house and big cars and a 4x4 UVS, and a pension entitlement, right? And but it won't work, right? Because we absolutely don't have that resource to support the whole thing. So the whole world have to work together to figure out the model for tomorrow.
This question about hectoring or lecturing, I mean, I don't think it's just arisen, not in today's Financial Times. Remember about 2 or 3 years ago, after Lehman, there was a lot of criticism that the West was not an exemplar for China or for India. We saw the growth of confidence in China and India rise extremely significantly in Brazil under Lula, and now under Dilma. We'll see it. We saw it, and we will continue to see it. And I think this is the issue. The real issue is, and again we saw it last night, an unwillingness to deal with the real gorilla in the room, which is the U.S. deficit issue. Unfortunately, it looks as though we're going to see postponement of dealing with that issue until after the next general election in America in 2012. Goodness knows what the position will be in 2013. So we sit here in Davos, hopefully in January in 2013. I don't know what we will be saying then. I mean, basically, if you're running a multinational company, the world really divides into 4 divisions. The top division is the bricks and next 11. I use a football analogy. The Division 1 is the bricks and next 11, the civets. And in our industry, it would be the new media. Division 2 is the USA and Germany, because Germany is extremely strong, high value-added manufacturing, strong exports, has made a remarkable recovery. And we're seeing in Europe a shift to the east as well. The power of Russia, driven by energy, at $100 a barrel, the Russian economy works in spades. It works at $60 to $70. Poland and Germany. And the German investment in East Germany is paying off. And in our industry, I put free-to-air television in that second division as well. Third division would be Western continental Europe, perhaps the UK moving up into the second division, but Nouriel is a bit skeptical about the front-loaded deficit reduction plan of the UK, but at least they tried to deal with the issue, or are trying to deal with the issue. And I put newspapers and periodicals the most challenged by new media. Division 4 is Japan. Japan shows no signs. It's a 20-year sort of stagnation, and so it shows no signs of getting out of it. When you're faced with that, the message is clear what you do with a multinational company, where you make your investments in capacity and growth, and you don't make it in the Western core.
Jim, come on in, and then I'll come back to your
discussion of sort of, are they getting fed up with being lectured, turned into a discussion of trade. I work on President Obama's Export Council, and we spend a lot of time talking about trade. It's astonishing. There's some 600 free trade agreements around the world. The U.S. is party to less than 20 of them. Right. And, he's made a big deal, positive in my judgment, to get the Korean free trade deal passed. But, it still has to go through the process, and not enough progress on Panama, not enough progress on Colombia. Clearly, a whole Pan-Pacific free trade agreement needs to come. And I think trade is going to be incredibly important. One of the things that I do fear is that global cooperation is going to get harder, not easier, as the recovery continues to go. And so, as Nouriel said, trade protectionism could creep in, whether it's through currency or other ways, and I think that's something we're really worried about.
Nouriel and I were at a dinner last night where the following topics were raised in terms of insignificant international cooperation. Trade imbalance, I made a note, trade imbalances, capital flows, water resources, carbon emissions, innovation and immigration. On all of those points, people were saying at the dinner that there was insufficient international cooperation.
Well, Martin's comments as well about the U.S. deficit. There's been beginning talk, but it does look like we need a heck of a lot more action on it.
The question is whether it's pragmatism or realism.
Exactly.
I mean, is the president idealistically opposed to this, or is he moving to the centre? Was it the speech line? I think Nouriel feels that it was a more centrist speech. But we haven't seen
I think there was
the
positive
meat yet.
movement.
Zoom in.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. Sorry. Zoom in. Come on.
Yeah, you mentioned it's a global cooperation. I think it's really the urgent issue. And yes, everybody talk about it because the crisis is more or less a little bit passed away, although we're not over there yet. So the urgency is not there. I will say it's absolutely not true. Because what you say, as Martin says, is global policy cycle is in very different stage, right? If you're looking for the advanced economy, particularly Europeans, I mean, they are very much on tight the fiscal policy and a little bit of accommodating monetary policy in most advanced economy. U.S. is very outlier within the G7. So U.S. has both accommodating fiscal policy and monetary policy as well. They're still on the way. If you're looking for the emerging market, it's very much a tight monetary policy, a little neutral fiscal policy now. And so all the policies in the different area, but the world is still in a very fragile situation. As Martin said, and he was surprised we are today. We are. I think that's true because Martin, you're a big corporate. Big corporate is in fantastic situations. You have a very high profit margin, very high productivities. You have a lot of cash. But it's not the overall picture. If you're looking for SMEs, they're pretty challenging today. But moreover, if you're looking for the GDP, yes, we had a very strong GDP in the past years, but it's very much a rebound. Overall, I think we need to look about output level. If you're looking for the output level, end of last year, the world output level equivalent to the output level of the peak. That's 2008. That means in 2 years, we have a zero incremental growth of GDP. So that's the real situations. So in that sense, how do we coordinate the global economic, monetary, and fiscal and policies and move the whole global economy forward? I think it's absolutely the most important issue today.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the problem we're facing are global, whether it's global imbalances, monetary and financial stability, climate change, energy security, food security, trade issues, and so on. And the G7 or the G8 became obsolete, and now we have moved to G20. But there is not much cooperation occurring. On monetary and fiscal, on exchange rate, there is disagreement, but also on the bigger long-term picture issues, from trade to climate change to what to do with energy, there is no agreement. So instead of having a G20, I think we're going to a world that is a G0 world, which there is no leader, and there is not even a G2, and there is disagreement on all the fundamental short-term, medium, and long-term issues. So there is no global economic and policy governance.
The G0 world. Jim, you mentioned tensions between the public sector and the private sector, particularly in the US. Perhaps another, who knows, million jobs to be lost in state and local governments as they put their budget houses in order, as the private